Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Fired Up and Plugged In podcast powered by Emergency Reporting. This is the podcast for all 21st century fire and EMS personnel. I'm Tom Lewis, Enterprise Training Manager and the podcast producer. Joining our distinguished host, Randy Brugman, is Tracy Hemanowski, a licensed clinical psychologist with 20 years of clinical expertise working with service members, first responders, veterans, and their families. Dr. Hemanowski will share her experiences today about serving first responders and veterans. She began her work at a VA medical center, followed by an assignment working with repatriated prisoners of war. She was stationed overseas and stateside as an active duty U.S. Navy psychologist, followed by work as a DoD contractor for 11 years as the program manager of Naval Hospital Jacksonville's Deployment Health Center. For the past 8 years, Dr. Hemanowski has provided program development and lead clinical facilitation for nonprofit organizations that provide reintegration and recalibration retreats for veteran and first responder communities. She currently serves as a consultant for the St. Johns County Sheriff's SHIELD program and is the executive director of the First Responder Project, a nonprofit for first responders and their families. She is a nationally requested speaker on trauma-related subjects for military and first responder communities. She's also authored multiple articles on operational stress and was nationally recognized by the Center for Operational Stress Control with the Caregiver of the Year Award, the first time awarded to a civilian provider. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Hemanowski. Chief Brugman, it's all yours, sir.
All right, good day, everyone, and welcome back to another session of Fired Up and Plugged In. And today it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Tracy Hemanowski. Is a clinical psychologist and a founder of the nonprofit called the First Responder Project, which we're going to talk a little bit about today. Welcome, Tracy. It's so good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Thanks, Chief, for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Well, you served our country in the U.S. Navy for many years, and then you went on to be a DoD contractor for 11 years at the Naval Jacksonville Deployment Health Center. Mm-hmm. And I'd like you to share a little bit about those experiences and how it's brought us together today.
Okay. Well, I was associated with the military. My father served in the Navy, and my direct association, or indirect, more recently from that point, was my husband serving. He's an ER physician, and he was in the Navy as well. So I tagged along, and we traveled around the world and had some really wonderful experiences. I was able to do some volunteer work here and there, and we were stationed overseas and stateside. I took a commission when we were in Spain and was in OIS, Officer Indoctrination School, in just before 9/11. So 9/11 happened when I was completing that program. Fortunately made it back to where I lived at the time, over in Rota, Spain, and that began a career in the Navy, which I loved very much and was very reluctant to get out of as an active duty member. But we were also dual military, and we were starting our family, and so the writing was on the wall in terms of that. I had some really terrific experiences and unique experiences serving in the Navy in the short time that I did. I did not deploy, never deployed. Had some very interesting training, aircraft mishap investigations, being on the shuttle recovery team overseas, which fortunately we never had to be activated. Got a little bit of a behind the scenes look at Guantanamo Bay, spent a little bit of time as an interim officer in charge of the substance abuse rehabilitation program, and then naturally mental health along the way. My most rewarding time, without a doubt, was at the Deployment Health Center, serving for those who had borne the cost of war, and having an opportunity to help them navigate back from those experiences and deal with the accumulated trauma that came from that. Mm-hmm. And I reluctantly left that position, loved what I was doing, but really felt a pull to get back into the community and broaden and bridge the gap between our military first responders and our civilian first responders.
Well, you probably have seen quite a bit, especially at the Jacksonville Center. I mean, talk a little bit about some of the work that you did there. I mean, what was the element that I mean, you were probably partly dealing with mental health and behavioral health and stress issues, but probably just a matter of some reintegration issues as well.
Absolutely. There's a something I would say oftentimes is that when you're working with people who have to color outside the lines as a function of their job in the extremity of war, that they have to do extreme things and be exposed to and witness and receive, be on the receiving end of extremity, there is a natural shift that happens in personality and perspective. It's a paradigm shift and priorities change. They have to. And there's a simplicity in a deployment life. It's not easy, but it's very straightforward. It's life and death, literally. And so when people come back from that experience and go back into stateside military and have to go back into garrison life and doing, in some cases, doing a job that they did not do over there. So our individual augmentees would be plucked from stateside to go do a job that was well outside their MOS, their military occupational specialty, or their training or their rate. We would have cooks go over and be gunners. And we would have folks go over and do detainee operations, which was in and of itself a very unique tour. And then we would have our Marines, our soldiers, who would go over and do exactly what they were trained to do, as infantrymen, special and conventional forces. So there is a natural shift that needs to occur when you go into battle, when you step over that line, and when you come back. And oftentimes, in working alongside of people who are navigating that, there would ultimately be this realization that they needed to reconcile some things. They had been exposed to threat, to tragedy, to trauma. They were participating in that trauma. They were receiving that trauma. They were witnessing those things. And so there was a lot to sort through. And then you're talking about, not only maybe one bad day or several things that happen in one day, as is the case with civilian first responders, but then you accumulate days upon weeks upon tours. So, and there's a natural resistance to wanting to seek help. One, because none of us really want to open up Pandora's box and spill out the contents and sort through it, because it's ugly and threatening and scary and just unpleasant. And there's the code of resiliency, and there's the code of that stoic warrior and the ethos of, I am the responder, I'm not to be responded to. So I always gave people I worked with a tremendous amount of credit, and still do, for stepping over that line and saying, okay, I need to do some work. And we're doing a good job, and every day we make some strides in being able to knock down those layers of stigma, of which I think there are several, institutional, societal, and personal and cultural. But there is, so once you get over that, maybe that pride or the fear of needing to reconcile some things, there's a really amazing work that is done. And oftentimes that comes down to a conversation between the warrior, the operator, or the first responder and the human, because the human is always there, whether or not we really want that human to be there. They're always watching and noticing and absorbing all of that. And so even though, in the uniform, we like to think that there's an innate resilience and a psychological armor to protect us from those things, we're still observing it, and we're taking it in. And so that needs to be sorted through. And that's hard work. That's excruciating work. Yeah. It's emotional work. But I think really essential for quality of life outside of the job, but also to performance in the job, for longevity, for being able to keep doing what people really feel called to do. Not that it's not a job. It's beyond even a career. It's certainly not a paycheck. No. It's just this feeling of, I need to be running in that direction when everyone is running in the other direction. So it's admirable, to say the very least, for people to do that. So I've had the privilege of being able to spend most of my clinical days with people who are incredibly strong and resilient and need to decompress about those things.
Yeah, I think and I'm sure it's this is the case with warriors, but you tend to, in the fire service, and I think first responders in general tend to compartmentalize.
Yes.
A lot.
And
you see something, you put it in that box, and then you lock it up. And you can do that for, I think, for quite a while. Mm-hmm. But then all of a sudden the box is full.
Mm-hmm. It's finite. It is finite. Absolutely. Yeah. Just like the drum at the top of the water park, that's being filled. Everyone knows it's going to spill over. It's supposed to spill over, but no one really wants it to. And we want to be able to drill a hole in the bottom. But even if you have a hole in your bucket, it's not necessarily the diameter that you need for what's being poured in. And I think that compartmentalization is a blessing and really a skill that first responders inherently have. It may be what in part is required or what draws them into the work, but it also makes it difficult to be able to unpack those things. It's like these nesting dolls or these nesting boxes, and the closer you get to the one that's rattling, can rattle us, and that, so the tenacity that people have is, and it's in that, like, what I call like a good stubbornness, a passionate stubbornness, is what sometimes keeps us from wanting to seek help, because we feel like, okay, I'm not the person who needs help. Therapists are the same way. We make horrible patients. We're very critical of our therapists, and we think, why can't I do this on my own? Why can't I figure out how to, unmess up the way I'm parenting, or the way I'm being a spouse, or the way I'm, navigating through life. But, if my nose is in my book and it's right up against the page or right up against the wall, I can't see it. But I have to be humble enough that if someone's pointing it out, that, okay, maybe I need to check myself. So I have respect for that as well, because, I'm not a first responder in that sense by any means. But I need to occasionally know that if I'm getting defensive, or if I'm pushing back, knowing that my cup is full, then I need to do what I need to do, what I tell people to do. So you've got to let it go, right? You've got to find it and try and find a way to get it out. But what interested you in the first response community? How did you get there? Well, in working with military personnel, there were oftentimes hybrids. So folks who had served in law enforcement in particular, in some cases in the fire service or in medical, or in some form or fashion, they were essentially a first responder hybrid in the military. So they were MAs, Master at Arms, military police. They were firefighters. They were shipboard or on the ground. They are corpsmen, nurses, doctors, chaplains, detainee, or prison guards. And so they have this civilian counterpart in this community. And so having done some writing, reading, and ride-alongs, and it seemed like my area of focus has always been occupationally induced trauma. So trauma that is part and parcel of the job. If you're on the job and you're doing the job correctly, you are invariably going to get exposed to other people's trauma, their worst days, we often say. And it just seemed that it was just very visible to me over time, and just living in my community, that it was everywhere, that there are first responders all over, and noticing how we've worked on stigma in the military, and both institutionally and personally, and seeing so many resources in the veteran community, in the military community, and then noticing a dearth of those resources, and very, very strong layers of stigma, multiple layers of stigma, that, so I started just look into that and investigate that a little bit, and saw, and looking at the suicide rate, when we have this iconic number in our head for veteran suicide rate, and when you bring the first responder community together and you look at that rate, it is strikingly high, but you don't hear about it. Yeah. And so it just seemed like it was pulling me in that direction, and seemed to be in my wheelhouse a bit in terms of the occupational trauma. So I really felt it was important to bridge the communities together as well, because these are the 1%ers of our community that operate in the shadows and operate without asking for any recognition or any acknowledgement, but who are a community that need understanding from the people who they serve.
Yeah. So you started a nonprofit organization that's called the First Responder Project, and you started that in January of 2020. Mm-hmm. And I really love your tagline because it's because everybody needs a backup. And, you know, I think that's really, really true. And in not only the first response community, but especially or as importantly in the military. So tell us a little bit about the genesis of that. You touched on it, and what you offer. So if I'm a firefighter in California and I'm having some struggles and I see this, if I want to reach out, you know.
And we welcome people to reach out to us, certainly. On our website, which is firstresponderproject.org. And I have to tell you, I was very surprised and a little bit disappointed that name was available as a domain name, because that also said to me, okay, wait, and I know that's not to say that there aren't plenty of nonprofits working with first responders. They're really wonderful ones, but that was notable to me. But on the website, we have resources in terms of blogs that people can read to kind of dial into that experience that we want them to be able to look at, both family member and those in the line of duty who have written in to read what they're saying and find some hope in those messages. We invite people to also write in and provide blogs. We have a listing of things that we're going to be posting in the future. We've just started a newsletter as well. So we welcome people to reach out to us in that way, to both give to each other, to their brothers and sisters in service, but to also be able to take from that. Because I think that as part of that mantra of everyone needing backup, really one of our most fundamental needs as human beings is to be understood. And that's difficult to bridge that understanding from service-oriented professions to the community, that there's a lot of people who misunderstand or are somewhat blind to the inherent stressors and strains. And you match that up with a resilient community who doesn't ask for help, so you can see how that kind of perpetuates itself. So we are our mission in the nonprofit is to provide, it's a somewhat of a three-pronged mission. One is to provide psychoeducation, to provide that to providers, to grow a cadre of community providers who can develop cultural competency, and to be able to say that even though they may not have served in one of those lines of service, that they are well read and understand the mores and the internal structure and the inherent stressors and strains. In fact, we have a training, what we're calling thin line training, this Saturday. It's going to be an online training, and we're providing CEs because providers need to get continuing education. And it's going to be a 6-hour program, online virtually, of course, that anyone can avail themselves of. And we're going to be having 6 individuals who are going to be speaking from their different lines of service, corrections, fire, EMS, law enforcement, fire rescue, if I didn't say that, dispatchers, and then also providers who are going to be talking about how to become more culturally competent and passing down some good information. So that psychoeducation is for providers. It certainly is in the form of trainings and briefs to agencies and departments who are interested in bringing us in to talk about mental health without sounding like mental health people, because that can be an instant turnoff if you start kind of hiding behind all your clinical nomenclature and so forth. Because at the end of the day, it's about humanity and how to deal with humanity and inhumanity. So we are also providing summits every year, in-person summits. We've had a really wonderful response to that of people who are attending and are very engaged. So our audience is very active. We have speakers, but we always have time for Q&A, and we found that there's almost this urgency to talk about it, to be able to get these things out there. So in addition to the psychoeducation, we're wanting to provide peer connection and camaraderie. Families, the work family in a first responder community is usually very tight, but that doesn't mean that those are the people that you can go to
Right.
to bare your soul, or to let your the hair down a little bit and talk about some things that are bothering you, because there's always this concern or fear of, are my comrades, are my brothers and sisters going to question whether or not I'm okay to do the job. And one can have stress symptoms and still be okay to do the job. You just have to check those things and be aware of them. It doesn't mean that you can have, as a soldier, you can have post-traumatic stress and be deployable. In my opinion, in my clinical opinion, it depends on the person, but it doesn't mean that one isn't, the two can coexist. And it's just about self-awareness and being thoughtful and mindful of those things. So we want to make sure that there is opportunity for peer connection, whether it be through a summit or the blog. We have family forums every month for family members to be able to call in and to get a little bit of psychoeducation, and also be able to have some camaraderie as well. Not necessarily with people, and maybe particularly not with people in their agency, in their county, being able to hear from one another. And our third prong approach, which we're really excited about developing as quickly as possible, is running what we call recalibration retreats. So retreats where people can come in out of uniform, off duty, and be able to learn a little bit about how we compartmentalize the advantages and disadvantages, all the things that we've been talking about today, and have a chance to hear from each other. Having spent a lot of time running retreats with another organization in the past, it's invariably, you can see the healing power of being able to be in a room full of like-minded, like-experienced, like-hearted people. That in and of itself is healing and very powerful. So we're excited to start those for first responders. We'll probably have some that are service line centric, and then maybe some that are more eclectic, so bringing different first responders together. We'd also really like to have family member retreats as well. So that is our grand mission. We're an all volunteer force. We all have other jobs that pay our bills and keep us invested. But all of our first responder, all of our cadre are first responders in some form or fashion. So we really have subject matter experts from our advisory board to our founding board and all the folks that help us out in what we do. So it's a really wonderful group of people, and we welcome more. We want to be innovative in the things that we offer. If, again, going back to that, working outside the lines, you have to think about incorporating nature and kinetic activities and things that inherently heal in their own right. So that's going to be a big part of what we do as well.
Well, and you're using some unique strategies for that. You might want to highlight a little bit about some of the things that you're doing to actually accomplish that.
So in the past, some of the ways that we've addressed the effects of trauma exposure on the body are to do activities that are relaxing and at the same time challenging. So an example would be scuba diving to work on breathing retraining. So if folks are all of a sudden finding themselves having anxiety or panic on the job or off the job, that just kind of came out of left field, maybe it's a tipping point or whatnot, then, if you go underwater and try to breathe on a regulator underneath your kit, underneath your the band of your BCD, then that kind of breathing is visceral. Then you remember what it's like to do that, the breathing that kicks on the parasympathetic nervous system that then calms you down. So being able to give people an opportunity to master their body and mind over matter and matter over mind. So that working with horses and doing equine therapy, that gives you that chance to have the neural Wi-Fi between you and a horse. Horses don't lie, and they're straight up, and they will tell you a lot about yourself if you are open-minded and willing to listen. Other things that have other innovative type things. Basically anything to do with animal assisted therapy, I think, is very helpful for folks. There's also opportunities to work on trauma in different ways. So not always outside of not always within the four walls of therapy. Sometimes you have to be not just looking directly at someone. Sometimes you need to be sitting next to someone. Sometimes you need to be walking while you're talking. And so those are the types of things we want to be able to incorporate, whether it be advising and assisting an agency, or providing a formal retreat, eco challenge courses, ropes courses, things where there is physical contact, so that, you know, if I'm relying on someone so that I don't fall off of a platform, and there is that physical contact, that's visceral, that's human. And if I'm doing that in the morning, then I'm more likely to sit with someone in the afternoon and be more connected to them. It's just something, it's just undeniable. It just kind of happens. So from that to sitting around a campfire to whatever those elements may be, but we think we have a pretty good grasp on, you know, how the human needs to feel in order for that conversation, you know, with the warrior, the service member, service operator feels.
Great techniques. I totally agree with that. And I really appreciate that you've focused on the family as well. That's one of the things I found as a fire chief, that as we got into this whole, I won't say an issue, but just a whole program of how do we deal with the mental health of our first responders, and we brought in outside expertise, and they offered the ability for families to confidentially reach out, as they did with the firefighting personnel as well. And I found it interesting that more family members actually reached out versus the first responders. And so there's absolutely a need there, and I'm so happy that that's part of your program.
It was a really invaluable opportunity to be able, on the military side, to be able to reach families. And there was sometimes pushback on that, you know, that was not the mission. The mission was the warfighter. And I would say, well, who do you think is helping the warfighter out? And if you have a warfighter who is having marital distress or is struggling with parenting, then that person's, you know, mind cannot be fully on what they're doing. Not only that, but we have to honor and the sacrifice and value the resilience of the family who is supporting their first responder or their military personnel. These are families that their resilience and their willingness to put up with things and play second fiddle, sometimes at a moment's notice or sometimes very predictably, and to miss out on dinners together and holidays and experiences that so many of us just take for granted.
Yeah.
We complain about having to go an hour early to get a seat at the band concert, but we get an opportunity to be at the band concert. So we really want to make sure that we're looking after the mental health of the family, that we're providing them with tools and strategies and education, and also a sense of understanding. When you bring family members together and there is a very common shared experience with them as well, and they need to be able to talk about that and not feel like they're complaining, and not feel like they are alone. So we very much have them, you know, on equal footing with our first responders, because they're oftentimes the foundation. And at the end of a career, at the end of the day, at the end of the shift, at the end of, you know, of the traumatic moment, they are there and standing by and always trying to navigate. Do I lean in? Do I lean out? Do I just stay silent? Do I ask questions? How do I manage seeing the changes and the evolution and all those shifts that happen and just watch it happen? And, you know, what if I kind of see I'm losing that person, you know, the human, the person that I, you know, knew maybe before the service or early on. And so that's usually a very common experience of, I don't know when and if, and there's just this dance of how to manage the things, at the same time managing their own tasks and identity and jobs and parenting and all the things that they have to do. So we give a lot of respect to our families.
Yeah, well, thanks for doing that. I think that that's something that we have, I know in the Fire and Emergency Services have long overlooked. And so I think we finally are starting to get somewhat of a handle on that, but we have a long ways to go. And I think you're right. I mean, I know from my perspective, after you go home and if you've had a really, really bad shift, the last thing you want to do is relive it.
Right.
And, I think having a spouse that understands that sometimes you just need the space and you want to kind of forget about it. You don't want to have to retell the story.
Right. And spouses, first responder spouses, military spouses are go-getters. They get things done.
Yeah.
And down, be able to and fix or to just be, to be the ear, to be the shoulder it's tough to be shelved, and to constantly be, and sometimes that's protective on the part of the first responder, is protective of themselves because they don't have the emotional bandwidth to go through it. They're still sorting through it, or they have already put it in the box and don't want to open it. And sometimes it's not wanting to burden their loved one. Oftentimes it is not wanting to burden them with that story, not wanting them to worry about something going wrong to their loved one. So there is as I've often said, it's kind of like first responders have a Pandora's box of exposure to threat, tragedy, and trauma, and not to say that family members don't experience those things as well, but it's almost like the black box recorder, on the kitchen table in the middle that's not being addressed. It's the pink elephant in the room that no one talks about. But when someone we love is going through profound things and we see profound changes, it's a very disabling feeling not to be able to care for them in the way that we want to.
No, it is. And I think just from the Fire and Emergency Service perspective, both police and fire, and hats off to what the police officers are going through right now. It's extremely difficult, but I think on both counts, I mean, our jobs changed significantly in the last 10 or 15 years. I mean, we're running substantially more calls. They get much less sleep than they do, at least on the fire side, since they're on 24-hour shifts. So we have sleep deprivation, disruption. We're seeing more significant calls, more violent calls, and so I think it's just I think it's just reflective in the stresses that we're seeing in our personnel. And I think we really have to step back and say, we really need to address this in a different way. Maybe changing shifts, not working them as much, providing more in-house support like yourself, so that we're not burning these people out. Because if it continues to go this way in the next decade, we're going to lose a lot of people, unfortunately. And I don't see that happen.
There are these physiological changes that occur but it's the nature of the beast. It's the nature of the job, but it's significant. The longevity of life after the service is foreshortened.
Very short.
And that is, again, that's not something that a lot of people think about. They have this very maybe distanced perspective on what it is to do the job. And I encourage any civilian, any community member to educate themselves, to go to a citizens academy with law enforcement. It's really, really interesting training, and to kind of get a look behind the scenes on what goes on, to do ride-alongs. Any citizen can avail themselves of that, and it's eye-opening very quickly to be able to see both moments of heroism, of deep humanity, and also moments of hopelessness and powerlessness, and not always being. And that is a psychological, emotional, soulful strain on first responders. To be able to not help is a debilitating feeling.
Yeah, it is.
And then as people transition into retirement and and lose their master identity and having to navigate the now what aspect of it, and having very much earned their retirement, but not being able to sit still and not know what that's all about. And why do I feel exhausted all of a sudden? And when I was going in fifth gear, for so many years, and now I'm going in first or second gear, and why can't I manage that? And it's because you took a breath for a minute and your body noticed and it's taking advantage,
Well, there's a whole other program on retirement evolution.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I can attest to that. It took me about 7-8 months to really figure out, just how much stress I was carrying, and although I'm doing other things now, but it's just different, and that loss of identity, but at the same time, there's just a lot of emotional pieces that go along with that, and I always encourage, and I talk to a lot of chiefs that are in other members of the department, both police and fire, that are preparing to retire, and I say, you need to start thinking about that about 2 years out.
Mm-hmm.
You need to start getting your mind wrapped around and prepared for that you're not going to be what you were, and life's going to change, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Just be ready. There's going to be about a 6 or 7 month ride.
Yes, that you just it's there, but you're just not quite sure. It's like going up, the click of the emotional roller coaster, and then it's a dark tunnel, and you don't know which direction it's going to go in. But if you, I think that being vital and needed is, when it's your calling, is its own addiction, and it's a wonderful it's a wonderful one to have, but nevertheless it there needs to be a decompression from that, and being able to figure out how to redirect your efforts and your energies, and while you're contending with having to do some inventory of what's in that box. It's like trailering a boat with a rope that you can't. You're going to roll through some stop signs, and you're going to have to keep moving until maybe you're on an incline. then you can slowly close the gap. But there's this sense of, I don't want this to catch up to me. And it does. It's natural to have to reconcile those things, because they are profound, impactful things. And so we don't want to get to the point where we are numb to things and cold and seemingly cold or shut down. It's really not the way of the first responder. It's a compassionate heart and a giving heart, and so sometimes just figuring out, why am I behaving this way when I'm off duty, and behaving this way when I'm on duty, because I care about all of these people, the people I don't know, and I'm willing to lay my life on the line for, and certainly the people the people I've chosen to have in my life, and I want to have in my life. And so that's all part of that self-awareness and knowledge building, and recognizing that it is what it is, that this is very common and natural to happen, and it's not necessarily healthy, and it can be unpacked and reworked.
Yeah. So as we close today, just how can people engage again, and if they want to engage or support the First Responder Project, how can they do that?
Thank you for asking. Certainly, we can have people are welcome to reach out to us via email on the website. We are on Facebook. We're on social media. All the buttons are on there. We have a YouTube channel with some other videos, and we're going to be putting some psychoeducation out via that medium as well. We have a donate button. I can tell you that any money that comes into the organization directly goes to service. So because we have a volunteer force and we have in-kind donations from our community, always looking for more, of course, if people are in our area and want to offer, for example, a space that we can have a retreat, or to offer to feed our first responders or their family members during an event like that, our summits and the like. So in-kind donations, I think that also is a wonderful community give back. It's letting our first responders and military know that there are people who care about them by volunteering their time or giving of their what they have to offer. And any direct donations that come in go directly to retreats, to be able to sponsor someone. We don't ever want to. Our intention is to never have anyone have to pay for any of the services that we provide. Yeah. So if they're coming to a retreat and they're staying in a facility, a ranch or a home or a retreat center, they are not going to be paying for that. As it is, we already know that they're taking time off from work, and it may be that they're taking time off for their second or third job and losing income to be able to experience some healing. So any of those, any of the funds that we raise will go directly back into our community first responders.
And your virtual seminars, same way? I mean,
yes.
You're probably getting people from all over the world that are, attending.
Yes, we welcome people from anywhere. We also put links up to other organizations that are doing webinars, and we really want to share and partner with people and collaborate. So if we have anything online that's virtual, we welcome anyone from all over the globe to dial into that. And those are going to be growing over time. We've tried to put together, particularly during the pandemic, first responder and military call-ins, and there it's been difficult to get people to call in, and I think there's fear of of putting your heart on your sleeve and not really knowing who's on the other line, who else is on those calls. We find that in person is always preferable. If I'm working individually with someone and there's an opportunity for a virtual or an in-person, every day of the week. So we really want to be able to grow not only our community around where we are geographically, but certainly across the country and across the world. We have first responders all over, and there's trauma all over. So the human being isn't impacted all that differently. Naturally, we all bring something from our own background to the table, which means every experience is going to be unique. But fundamentally, at the end of the day, we experience our mind, body, heart, and soul experiencing these things. And we want people to be able to know that they're not alone. That's a huge mitigating factor against hopelessness and against suicide. And that's the most tragic statistic that we don't want to see keep rising. Yeah,
no, totally agree. So, Doctor, thank you for being with us today. It's been just a pleasure to chat with you, and an honor to meet you. And thank you so much for what you're doing for our warriors and our first responders. And thank your husband as well for his service. And I think first responders have a special love for ER docs because we see them a lot. And tough jobs.
And I want to thank those who are integral in our organization, and Johnson, and our advisory board, and our founding members, and all of our volunteers. They inspire us to keep going every day. They give of their heart and their mind and their intellect and their passion. We are, as a mental health person, I just see myself as a conduit, so that people can kind of speak through me to other people and to grow the community of understanding. So I appreciate all the people who are working with us. Wish I could name them all, but you can see on our website.
well, thank them all from us. And again, thanks for being on the program today.
Thank you very much. Take good care. Stay safe.
Thank you.